Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of What Fulfills You. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I'm your host. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. This episode is actually a dedicated birthday episode. It's one that I do every year, but each year I kind of format it differently, or maybe this year rather, because usually I kind of do like a set amount of lessons that I have learned through my specific age. And this year, I'm going to dedicate it to a non-scripted, no outline, open letter to my younger self and my future self, especially because this year I turn 29, and I guess it is the last year of my 20s, which I just felt in my little gut. I was like, "Oh wow, this is like a crazy feeling to say, but I guess at the same time, like life keeps moving on, right? This is just how life goes." And so as I was reflecting on what would be worthwhile to share as a birthday reflection, I figured I will perhaps answer my own question that I often ask podcast guests, which is one thing that I would do again in my 20s and one thing that I might do differently. And I will definitely say, to kind of lead this topic, I'm really proud and grateful for the way I have led my 20s. It's not to say that it is the end all be all if you don't get certain things down or right, but I do think it helps over time the sooner you do the harder things. And I recognize that when you are in your 20s, it is the most opportunistic chapter of life in the sense that you have a lot less to lose, so to speak, compared to your 30s and 40s. And I want to make it clear that obviously anything and everything can still be done at any point, and I firmly believe that. I think psychologically, when you are younger, like children, there is very little fear because you just don't know the things that adult life will teach you. So take that as an advantage. And that being said, I would say one of the big things that I would do again in my 20s is to build early on. And what I mean by that is all the things that kind of add up to the macro picture of where my life is now. I think fundamentally, building on financial stability and building on having the confidence to be on my own emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, that for some reason I became very aware of in my early 20s. And that became then a focus of mine to just start building a life for myself. And I started the process when I was in college. And I'm really grateful for that because it enabled me to start building the foundation of my individual life earlier on and having more confidence to work towards this vision and this dream rather, where I noticed that probably through the years, like the thing that I heard people say the most, especially like in their 30s and 40s and 50s, that they wish they could have done differently was starting this sooner, starting to invest their money sooner, starting to understand the concept of how to spend, how to save, sooner. Especially for women, it was often around wishing that they had learned how to build a life independent of another person sooner. And I don't think that that is intended to say that, like I'm certainly not sitting here saying I don't need another person, I don't need to depend on a man, like that kind of thing. I think that is very separate concept from the aspect of what I'm saying now, which is the importance of knowing how to take care of yourself, and the importance of feeling confident that, hey, I can take care of myself should anything happen, whether it's to my longtime partner, or whether I don't have a partner at all, or whether, like someone who is taking care of me gets sick. Like, it is so vital to just know your own shit. And I'm really grateful that I started on that path early in my 20s. And I think a lot of people get the idea that I knew what I wanted to do in my life, and that, or rather, people who are like this at a certain stage in life, that they knew what they wanted to do. I think the essence is more about being willing to experiment sooner and pivot when you have that realization of what's working and what's not. And so I remember I started photography back in college. I started social media back in college. I started blogging back in college. I did so many different things that actually are things that I am doing in this very moment in my career. And even sales, like I didn't stay in my corporate job beyond a year and a half. I have used my skills in sales to apply to my business today, to close deals, to handle calls and handle prospects and handle clients. Like, that is a skill that I have taken from my sales job, but I don't work in sales anymore, right? Although I have the belief that, like, you are always selling in the sense in your career. And so obviously didn't stay in that job, but I learned how to pivot, and I learned how to experiment and throw paint at the wall. And ultimately, through those experiences, compounding, that built the foundation of who I am. And that's something I would do again and again if I were to relive my 20s over and over, is to build that foundation. I will say I also probably learned the importance of doing this because I was watching other women in their late 20s do this while I was in college. And I was like, okay, that's the direction I want to go in. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what I got to do to get there quite yet. But I know that that is a type of woman I want to become and I want to work towards. I remember very vividly 2017 Thanksgiving. I was on my flight back to California after Thanksgiving, and I was a junior in college at the time. I was like 4 months, 5 months out of a breakup, and I was feeling all the different things at the time in my life. And I remember I was listening to a podcast. I think the podcast was actually called like the Influencer Podcast. And it's strange. I could be wrong too, but it's strange because at the time, influencer wasn't actually the same as influencer today. All that to say, a guest that I heard on the podcast was Lauren Everett's. Actually, was she already married? But it was Lauren Everett's Bostic, who is now more known as like Lauren Bostic, and she's the founder of the Skinny Confidential. And I was listening to the podcast at the time, and I remember the shit that she said, the mindset, the balance between logic and emotion, and knowing how to balance between the two. I was like, yes, yes, yes. I wrote everything down. I remember I had an epiphany on that plane, and I was like, okay, this is the path that I'm gonna go down. I could feel like I am going towards that direction, like this woman, towards what she's doing and being and embodying. And I would 100% advise on that too, is like the fact that I can think back to I was sitting in an aisle row seat. I was on my way to Phoenix, Arizona. I think that was actually the stop that I had, like the layover. And I remember this so vividly because that's how impactful it was to me. So find people that you want to follow along, and find people that make you want to embody that. You want to embody all of those qualities, right? And so of course you can't always find perfection, but I think that's something that I really liked about Lauren when I first discovered her was the fact that I think either she was engaged or married. I knew she was in a long-term partnership. It's something I also want. Later down the road, she had children, right? So that's like a big one. And through all that, she's an entrepreneur and she's like building and growing little by little. And I realized like those things I also want to embody. When someone shows me that it is possible and that it is a living reality for another, it is telling me that I can also have the same reality. It is within my reach and it's all about my willingness and my desire to be there and to envision that. And I think the other side of that is having a limiting belief that it is, too hard or too out of reach or maybe impossible or maybe only for those types of people. And so I think it's important that you reflect on how you speak to yourself and how you think of yourself because for whatever reason, I know that back then and now, my belief has always been, oh, because they are doing that, I can do that too. I think another big thing that I would do again, it's kind of more random, but it's a very specific event of mine in my early 20s, is moving to Los Angeles from Orange County. So for those who have never been in California or don't know much about California, that is about like a 45-minute to 1 hour difference. Like I moved to Los Angeles and I did it on a whim. It was not necessarily planned. It was not in my cards, but the moment I had the idea because of a gut feeling and also being inspired by external factors, it was because of someone I was kind of briefly seeing at the time. Um, and then also just other things aligning. I just had this feeling of okay, this is the right move, this is the next move. And it was crazy because so many other things lined up after that. I had reconnected with my old roommate who became a good friend of mine again. Then I made new friends in Los Angeles, and all of them are entrepreneur friends. And the thing with that move was that it was a balance of logic and gut in the sense of logically it made sense where it was related to my industry and what I wanted to do in the future. It was pushing me a little bit out of my comfort zone, but also was again still within reason where worst case scenario, if I want to go back to Orange County, I can, or the friends, the people I have, they're a 45-minute drive away, so it's okay. Like I realized like it's a risk, it's a jump, but it's not too big where it can feel harder to adapt to. And I didn't have the biggest support in that process, particularly from one of my parents, but I think through that experience, I learned how to trust myself even more, and I learned how incredible it is to trust my own decisions and trust that I know what's best for me and that I can repeat this again. And I think prior to that, I had already experienced that aspect of, okay, I made this decision before, I can do this again, and I know myself. So this was probably like the second or third big one where I was like, yeah, I know myself. I think this is going to be a really good experience for me. I remember once I moved to LA, the only thing I wished was that I moved sooner or that I had more time in living in Los Angeles because I knew that my ultimate end goal was to move to New York in August of the following year. So it was going to be a 1 year lease, and I knew I was going to go to New York. And I would say that's something that I am really grateful for was just building on, especially in my early years from like 20 to 24, really building on my life experiences and taking it as kind of like data point really or data points to recognize what direction and what environment is best for me, what environment is going to lift me up and propel me forward and challenge me. And looking back, I would say this is kind of a parallel to my life as a former competitive figure skater and tennis player, where the environments I was in as a high performing athlete was challenging, were around people that were constantly better than me. And you can look at it two ways. You can look at being in environments where you are not the best or yet. It is great because it pushes you to change your standards of what greatness and excellence is. Or you can frame it as, wow, I'm never going to be as good as them. I'm never going to be as fit as them. I'm never going to be as pretty, like whatever it is, right? But I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I was in those environments really early on in my life that I started to frame it as this is awesome. Like this is the standard. This is what excellence looks like. I got to get there, but that's why I was drawn to places like LA and New York and places where you are a tiny fish. And I think everything comes down to the way you frame it in your mind. It's not bad or good either way. If you prefer a small town, if you prefer a different place, that is totally okay too. You just have to understand why it is that this type of environment is best for you. And that just comes from years of life experience in knowing yourself and taking it with you towards your future. So, on the other hand, my open letter to my future self, when I was thinking about this was very simple and straightforward. I think what I hope my future self does and continues to do is to continue to fulfill her dreams and to go after those dreams. I think the only regret I would have in my life is that if I were to not have gone after my dreams and to have done the things I wanted to do on this earth, or at least try. After the Winter Olympics, I just found a great reminder in watching women in sports do their thing. Lindsey Vonn, especially, she is an incredible athlete. She has the mindset of a champion and someone that knows how to do the thing just for herself because she enjoys it, because she loves it. Alyssa Liu, who I watched live, winning the first Olympic gold medal since Sarah Hughes in 2002. It was just incredible because, again, a parallel of just doing it for herself and having joy and lightness along the way, which to me is so important. And I think naturally, when you are on the pursuit of your dreams that like mean the most to you, right? Like this is a side tangent, but I had this conversation in Italy with one of my good friends where I think especially as women, sometimes we shrink ourselves in not dreaming big enough. And remember, it doesn't have to be career related, but there are things that you deserve to have and do just for yourself. And I think it's just important to remember that because sometimes down the road, we end up making our dreams connected to another person or another thing, which is related to an outcome that we cannot directly control, right? So whether that dream is about getting married or having a family and whatever. Of course, those are valuable goals and a big part of your future vision, but that is also very contingent on being able to line up other things in order for that outcome to happen, right? Whereas what I'm referencing is having a dream that enables you to maximize your individual potential and the skills and the energy that you bring into this world, the gift that you have that other people cannot bring because they are not uniquely you and not uniquely who you are. And so, my hope for myself in the future 5, 10 years from now is that when I look back, I will nod my head and say, hell yeah, like I pursued my dreams. I really applied myself over the past 5 years to get to this place where I am today. And I hope that I can continue to do that through the evolvement of my life when I eventually have and build a long time life partnership, and hopefully that is marriage of some sort. Like I know that I will continue that when I'm in that chapter of my life. I know that I will continue that in the chapter of my life, if that involves children, right? I I hope to also encourage others and to inspire others that it is important to take care of yourself in this way, to have your own individual life, because like you can always stop, right? Like if you reframe it where 10 years from now, however old you might be, you can always just like not stop. You can stop doing it and then just focus everything on something else, right? But the difference is you can't take back time that has already passed and wish that you had done it. You know what I mean? So I would rather go and pursue all the things that I can, put maximum effort towards the things that I want to contribute to, the things that I want to do in my life, the things that I want to accomplish, right? And the most important thing is that I enjoy the journey along the way. Of course, to me, that's a given, but sometimes that's not always a given to those who are listening. It's important that you enjoy the journey the most, that that's where you're having your most fun. That is where you are in your essence. And I personally believe that you are enjoying life the most when you are pursuing and doing actively the things that bring you joy. When I was watching Alyssa Liu, skating clearly brings that to her. That's the same for me. And tennis is also that too. Or having insanely meaningful conversations with a group of friends or people that I care about, that also brings me joy. Or when I am just walking the streets of Paris or walking the streets of New York, that also brings me joy. It is the little things along the way that make the final outcome, whatever it might be, worth it. And tying into that, a reframe that I recognized with my psychologist slash therapist, who he's mostly a sports psychologist, which is why I love working with him. But he mentioned, a way that I can think about this, which is that just like in tennis, right? What is the goal? Is the goal to win the match, or is the goal to have fun playing tennis? And obviously, when I sit there and think about it, I know it's about having fun, enjoying the sport. It is about having fun on the court when I hit the ball and play the game. And it's point by point, right? If you sit there and you are mid-match and you're thinking about the outcome, the score, whether you win or lose, you are not going to enjoy the game. So that's something I've been working on in the way I reframe things is, after all is said and done, do I enjoy what I'm doing? Do I enjoy this process of becoming who I am? And if the answer is yes, then obviously I keep going in this direction. If the answer is no, if I'm not enjoying this environment, if I'm not enjoying this career or this path, if I'm not enjoying this relationship, if I'm not like whatever it is, obviously, first approach is like finding solutions, finding tweaks, finding ways to shift it so that you can step back into that zone, that flow, that essence of who you are, which ultimately brings enjoyment, right? And so that is my little open letter to my future self as I go through the next few years and as I embrace 29 and everything that is to come. I'm so grateful for this podcast to have many of you along the journey over the years. If you have been listening for a while, have been along the journey with me as well, I would love to know that. I would love to hear from you. If I have not heard from you for a while, please DM me on Instagram. You guys know who you are. I love when you guys reach out. And I hope that everything I share little by little, I hope it's impactful. I hope it encourages you to think bigger and dream bigger. And thank you so much for being along the journey. I will chat with you all in the next episode.